The 2024 NFL Draft has come to a close for the Carolina Panthers. Let's break down their 4 selections they made on day 3 of the draft right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Be sure to subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube, where I am live once again this weekend as we have closed out the 2024 NFL Draft in Detroit. So be sure to subscribe, follow the show for free, and check out the show wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council. I'll be back with you on Friday to answer your weekly Friday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me to get those questions into me for next week's edition of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. We have done it. We have made it through the NFL draft. What a long period of time it was leading up to the draft. And sitting here on Saturday, my God, I did not realize it would take 6.5 hours for the Panthers to be able to make 4 selections. I typically have not sat here on Saturdays in past years of doing the show, then come on live to talk to y'all. But I felt like this year, with the changes and really the obligation being here in Locked On, I needed to come live and to sit there, watch the draft all Saturday long. Wow, that was a chore, man. It was very long, but excited to get into the 4 selections the Panthers made on Saturday afternoon with y'all here for this moment in time. So going into the final day of the draft, the Panthers had pick 101 to start out the 4th round, pick 157 from the Jets trade in the 5th round, pick 200 from the trade to move up to 32 overall to get Xavier Legette from Buffalo. And then they close out in the 7th round, the trade with the Pittsburgh Steelers for Deontay Johnson, getting pick 240 overall. The discussion we had on Friday night, following the conclusion of day 2, round 2 and round 3, was the Panthers had 2 pretty pressing needs at tight end and then at corner. Those are the positions that we wanted to see them address heading into day 3 of the draft. And primarily for me, who I wanted them to see them take was Tavion Sanders, a tight end out of Texas. And thank you, Carolina Panthers, because that's what they did to start off the 4th round and start off day 3 as they selected Tavion Sanders, a tight end out of Texas, 101st overall. Daniel Jeremiah immediately on the NFL Network said, you're drafting him for what he's going to give you in the passing game, but not so much in the run game. We're not concerned about the run game when it comes to the tight end position right now in Carolina. That's why Ian Thomas is here. That's why Tommy Tremble is here. And Tremble can add something as a secondary pass catcher at the tight end spot, but he's not going to ever be, in my opinion, a great run blocker and also an average to above average pass catcher at the tight end position. The Panthers needed to add somebody this offseason, whether it be a veteran or a rookie in the draft, that could fulfill the role as a pass-catching tight end to complement what they had already in Tremble and in Thomas. And Tavion Sanders absolutely is that. Looking at his stats the past 2 years at Texas, 99 receptions, 1,295 yards receiving, 7 touchdowns, which is a record for a tight end in the history of the University of Texas there at Austin. Looking at his yards after the catch, which is also key. Xavier Legette, somebody who has the speed, the power to break one. Tavion Sanders was great yards after the catch last year in college football. Looking at Pro Football Focus, he was tied for 18th best in college football for 7.7 yards after the catch there at Texas. A Texas offense that we have seen was absolutely loaded. Xavier Worthy, a 1st rounder, Adonai Mitchell, a 2nd rounder, Tavion Sanders at 101 as a 4th rounder. A couple of their offensive linemen also went. Jonathan Brooks, a 2nd rounder here at Carolina, a loaded Texas offense. And Tavion Sanders was one of the guys that was certainly a key cog in that for Steve Sarkisian long day, Steve Sarkisian this past year there in Austin. Looking at Pro Football Focus, their scouting report, they say that Sanders is a tier 1 athlete for the tight end position. He is still mastering the nuances of tight end play and needs to be more of a consistent mean streak as a blocker, but even with those concerns, what he brings to the table as a vertical threat is worth a top 50 pick. So the Panthers got a guy who PFF, and I saw a lot of boards had him in like the top 75, top 60, top 50. This is someone the Panthers got that had day 2, really round 2 credentials, who did not go until the 4th round with pick 101. That is amazing value for a team that desperately needed a pass catcher at the tight end position. Steve Mensch of ESPN.com, this is his breakdown of Sanders. He said Sanders has the burst to separate from linebackers and the size to win 50-50 balls working against defensive backs. He is a big target who can work against zone coverage looks. He's also a natural hands catcher with big hands. And we saw the video the Panthers put out there about Sanders. He's got some massive hands and the body control to adjust to passes thrown outside his frame. Sanders makes one-handed grabs and makes plays in traffic. He's quick and can break tackles after the catch, which leads to the 7.7 yards after the catch he had last year in college. He tracks the ball well and has the speed to make plays down the seam. That's what you need. Another playmaker for Bryce Young. They got Jonathan Brooks. They got Deontay Johnson. They added Xavier Legette. They now bring in Ja'Tavion Sanders at the tight end position. I'm finally thinking that tight end may be a part of the offensive passing game in Carolina. We thought last year bringing in Hayden Hurst, having Frank Reich and his offense that's been tight end friendly in the past was going to be the case. But did they have the players outside of Hurst to do it? No. They do have it now. Ja'Tavion Sanders. It's going to be a little bit of a learning curve for him to really get ready to be a blocker, because if he's not going to be able to do that, he's not going to have longevity here in Carolina or really any spot in the NFL. He'll bounce around the league like a lot of guys like Hurst and like a CJ Uzomah, who I mentioned yesterday on the show. They're great pass catchers. They don't do the whole tight end spot of that, the tight end blocking job very well, which is why they have not been around, at least staying at their clubs they've been on very long throughout their tenure in the league. So Ja'Tavion Sanders, love that pick. Was happy to see it, and that's exactly what I wanted the Panthers to do. They finally get their tight end. Now, let me do a quick ad read here before we get into the other spot Panthers really needed to address on Saturday afternoon. By talking about our friends over at LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process easier and quicker. In fact, 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So the Panthers immediately crossed off the box going to get a tight end, something they had not done throughout the offseason. They struck out on all 3 of the Seattle Seahawks tight ends. Presumably, they wanted at least one of them. Colby Parkinson, he's in L.A. Will Dissly's also in L.A. Noah Fant staying there in the PNW in Seattle. You would have thought that one of those guys would have been signed by the Panthers. Cody Parkinson was really the one I was looking at. I was thinking that is the most realistic option out of those 3. Now, Dissly was not available throughout the conversations that we had. Then he did become available right there at the beginning of free agency. Didn't work out. The Panthers, though, get their tight end in Ja'Tavion Sanders to add a pass catcher to that group. The worst tight end room in the NFL now has someone who's a legitimate pass catcher at that position. That is a positive for the franchise, but more importantly, a positive for Bryce Young, who needs playmakers. Panthers need to find a tight end. They also needed to add a corner to that room. You looked at it, J.C. Horn got his 5th-year option on Friday. Great for him. Needs to stay healthy. But the Panthers, they still believe in him, want to invest in him at least for 2 more seasons. Can make $3 million this year, then set to make about $12.5 million in 2025 with that 5th-year option. They brought in Dane Jackson, Troy Hill's back for another season. They need more bodies, especially on the outside at corner, and they went out and drafted Chau Smith Wade, defensive back from Washington State, with the 157th overall pick, which they got when trading with the Jets. He has 3 interceptions in his career, 18 pass breakups. He broke out at the Senior Bowl, and Senior Bowl week is very important for a lot of the NFL evaluators and scouts, as he had 2 interceptions, was defensive MVP in that game. And I'm sure he got the Panthers' radar. That was the first time where Dan Morgan and Dave Canales had ever been together as Panthers staffers looking at players, and it was down there in Mobile, and Chau Smith Wade certainly stood out that afternoon down there at the Senior Bowl. His junior year, he started 13 games, was honorable mention All Pac-12 RIP after leading the Cougars of 8 pass breakups and tied for the team lead with 3 forced fumbles. His senior year last year was shortened due to injury in the first 7 games, which he did play. Smith Wade had 36 tackles, 2 for loss, and 6 pass breakups. Daniel Jeremiah immediately on the broadcast, once the Panthers selected Smith Wade, said can play outside corner, which the Panthers need, can also slide back and play safety. So versatility is a big thing when it comes to Chau Smith Wade. Has excellent burst as a blitzer, is an absolute missile in the run game, someone who can cover tight ends. Love to hear all of that. And sounds like what Dan Morgan's always looking for, a dog. I know it's overused. I had someone tweet at me earlier this week saying, can Dan Morgan stop saying that? It's super cringe. Well, yeah, it's going to go down to be like the Matt Rule Jay-Z quote, if the Panthers suck, but if they win, he can say whatever the hell he wants. He can call anybody on the roster that he can say they're dogs. He can overuse it if he wants to, as long as they win games. And it looks like Chau Smith Wade, based off of that report from Daniel Jeremiah, fits what Carolina is looking for. And it's good to hear that he can play outside. He can play safety, probably can slide inside also and play nickel, which is something the Panthers, I think, are going to want him to do down the line. I don't know about this season if that's what they're going to ask him to do. We'll see. But being good as a blitzer and also great in a run game, something that we have seen back in the past, Dante Jackson really struggled with when he was here in Carolina. Love that. And that he can cover tight ends. Pro Football Focus, their scouting report on Smith Wade. He is the manifestation of the phrase, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, but the size of the fight in the dog. So right there, PFF also calling him a dog. His lack of NFL measurables limits his potential as an outside corner, but his short area movement could yield a starting role in the slot. So that's where his future likely is in Carolina. Steve Mensch from ESPN.com had this to say about Smith Wade. He is quicker than he is fast, and he plays with good balance matching up underneath. He reads quarterback and sorts out route combinations and zone coverage looks. He's not a ball hawk or a playmaker, and he's on the smaller side with shorter arms, but his timing and toughness make him competitive at the catch point. Smith Wade tracked the ball and made an impressive over-the-shoulder catch in the Senior Bowl, where the Panthers were, of course, on hand there at Lad People Stadium on that Saturday afternoon in Mobile. But much-needed cornerback depth. The Panthers only had J.C., Troy, and Dane Jackson, who you looked at as players or guys that you could really depend on. Obviously, Deshaun Jameson, DiCaprio Boodle, when called upon last year, they showed a lot more than I think anyone would have expected out of those guys in those situations, and good to know. I still kind of worry about the outside corner depth the Panthers have outside of JC and Dane Jackson. And this move, I don't think it should preclude them from addressing the need there at outside corner by signing Stephon Gilmore. He's right down the street from Dan Morgan, literally. He's been here in Carolina before. There are Gamecocks everywhere. His former teammate, Jadeveon Clowney, is here. DJ Woolham's here. They just brought in Leggett to Carolina. JC Horn is a Gamecock. Gamecocks all over the place in Carolina. And you have to think that he would maybe like to finish his career back home, or he wants to go find a contender like he's been in the last season with Dallas, faux contender. But you understand what I'm trying to say. The Cowboys aren't ever going to be contenders, but they don't stink. And the Colts didn't work out that year. He was there under Frank Reich when Frank Reich got fired midseason, like he did in Carolina last year. I would think that one of the first calls they're going to make post-draft when trying to fill out the rest of this roster is going to be to Stephon Gilmore and to his agent and figuring out how he can come and help out Carolina. Now, I don't know if Stephon Gilmore is going to be the difference between the Panthers being, I don't even know what record. I still don't think it's going to be a playoff team, even after what they've done at the draft. I like a lot of what they've done as far as just building towards the future. It would be nice, though, just depth-wise, to have Stephon Gilmore out there, as I just don't see the future corner opposite of J.C. Horn currently on this roster. And that is certainly a concern, whether Stephon Gilmore is on the roster or not. If he is on the roster, cool. It's shored up for a year. Then after that, he's an older player. He's not going to be sticking around here for the next 4 or 5 years. They're going to have to find somebody eventually that may be Big need again next year in the draft, but a good move to bring in some depth there and potentially your future starter in the nickel spot in Chau Smith-Wade, the defensive back from Washington State. One more quick ad read, then we can get into the last two picks the Panthers made on Saturday afternoon, going over to our friends from Monopoly Go. We've all been there, either as a player or fan. It's halftime. The scoreboard is not looking good. You're feeling low, not sure you or your teammate can pull out a win. That's when you dig deep, lift your head up, and say to yourself, time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, and take as much of my friend's money as I possibly can. That's right. The smash hit mobile game, Monopoly Go, lets you compete with your friends, get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's Monopoly you love, but on your phone anytime with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. Play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards. Make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball. Charge other players rent for the iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. Alrighty, looking at the last two picks the Panthers made at 200 and 240. I went into it thinking to myself, okay, I saw the report earlier this week from Joe Person that the Panthers would be interested in bringing in a quarterback in the draft after Dave Canales said either last month or earlier this month at the NFL owners meetings that they wanted to use a third quarterback spot on a veteran, and they may still do that, but they were interested in going to the draft, though, according to Joe Person, and potentially drafting a quarterback. And I would have been totally fine if they wanted to take a quarterback at 200. And at 240, I was thinking special teams. That would make sense. Maybe get another kicker, get another punter. Those are the two spots I thought would make some sense to address later on in the draft. But as we talked about leading up to the draft, looking at every single spot on the roster, wide receiver needed to be addressed, corner needed to be addressed, center, that's another spot that could have been addressed there at 200, 240 that the Panthers needed to do. You look at defensive tackle argument that needed to be addressed, linebacker as well, safety, just looking down the road, which they certainly did night two. There wasn't any position other than offensive line where the Panthers did not need to add somebody to that room. So with the 200 pick, the Panthers decided that they're going to add to the line of scrimmage, selecting Jaden Crumedy, the defensive tackle from Mississippi State. He, according to PFF, their scouting report, the pass rush production is not there for Crumedy, but he had a 72.8 run defense grade in 2023, proving that he does have the ability to develop into a rotational player on the defensive line. Steve Mensch from ESPN.com had this to say about Crumedy. Crumedy is a versatile defensive lineman with the size, length, and strength to set the edge when he lines up over offensive tackles and three-man fronts, and to hold his own when he lines up on the inside and four-man fronts. He flashes the ability to get off blocks and make plays when teams run at him. Crumedy has upside as an interior pass rusher. Okay, that's a little bit opposite to what PFF had to say. He shows good lateral mobility and balance on line stunts. Never heard of this guy until this afternoon. Just going to be completely transparent with you. I have no idea who this dude is, but he played in the SEC, and he's a big man, and they're putting him on the defensive line. Never a bad thing to add depth on the line of scrimmage. They could have done that in the draft with the offensive line. At center, they could have brought somebody in to compete with Austin Corbett. They decided not to do that. They could have brought another guard or a tackle, and I wouldn't have complained. You always need offensive linemen. You always need depth. That's a good thing. Defensive tackle, though, low-key, I don't even think it's even low-key. Like, this was a need, if we're being honest with ourselves. Aside from Derrick Brown, the D-line in Carolina sucked last year. They were terrible. Nick Thurman had his moments when he stepped up, but Deshaun Williams was bad. Shai Tuttle was also bad. He's only here still because of the contract structure. Thank you to Scott Fitterer and Samir Suleiman for that. It wasn't good last year. So your two starters outside of Derrick Brown were quite honestly terrible. You had some young guys like LeBron, Ray, and Thurman, as I mentioned, who stepped up, and especially later on in the season, I think it was the Falcons game. Definitely not the Packers game because the defense was bad in that game, but he stepped up late. That's a positive. And I talked about this offseason, getting those guys come back. That's great, especially rotationally, to see how they can continue to develop, especially with the same defensive coaching staff, Todd Wash back there as a defensive line coach. But they needed to add more to that spot. A'Shawn Robinson He replaced Deshaun Williams. He's more of a run stopper, which Deshaun Williams couldn't do last year. Then he is an interior pass rusher, and I'm totally fine with that. He also is a veteran, and he's not going to be around very long in Carolina. And Crumedy, as a 6th-round pick, likely not going to be around very long either, but at least he's a younger player and someone that this coaching staff, this scouting staff identified as someone who fit what they want to do moving forward. It's never a bad thing to add depth on the defensive line. So they need another defensive lineman, need someone who can be able to stop the run, and that's what he can do. So when A'Shawn Robinson gets tired, Crumedy can come in, replace him, and be another run stopper. The Panthers were 31st according to EPA expected points added last year against the run. The first 6 weeks, over 130 yards they gave to every single opponent on the ground. Aaron Jones and the Packers ran all over them in that game. If you can't stop the run, you cannot win. If you cannot protect your quarterback, you cannot win. The line of scrimmage is what matters most. I understand quarterbacks, the playmakers on the outside, all that's important. We saw last year, we don't even know how good Bryce Young is because the O-line was so bad. The defense, while they were good in some respects, couldn't stop the run. The O-line, the D-line, you got to win there first. You can't win at the line of scrimmage. You can't win at all. And the Panthers understand that as they want to be bullish running the football. They got their guys on the interior and Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt. They drafted the running back in Jonathan Brooks. And now they've added another piece at the defensive line in Jaden Crumedy, defensive tackle from Mississippi State with the 200th pick in the 2024 NFL draft. So welcome to Carolina. No idea who you are. Hopefully it works out for you. So the Panthers then transitioned until the 7th round to select 240th overall. Would have loved to see them take a kicker, but that's what they wanted to do. There was a mini run on kickers in the 6th round, started with the Vikings trading up to get Will Reichard from Alabama. Then the kicker from Arkansas went off the board. Another kicker went off the board, and it's all right, maybe they're not going to get a kicker. So they ended up not getting a kicker. They decided to select someone from the national champions, Michael Barrett, linebacker from Michigan with the 240th overall pick. According to PFF, their scouting report on Barrett is he's a natural football player, but he's too small to play linebacker and not athletic enough to play safety. Okay. He projects as a potential special teams ace with some defensive responsibilities in dime situations. Whoever is going to be drafted in the 7th round, it was about special teams. Would have preferred a specialist, but special teams. That's the only way that guy's making the roster anyways. And if that's a report that he can't play linebacker and he can't play safety, but he can be a special teams ace, all right, I'll take it. Steve Bench from ESPN had this to say about Barrett. That's just hilarious to me, man. Just to read a report. He's not good enough to play linebacker, not good enough to play safety, but he can help you in special teams. Okay. But Steve Bench from ESPN had to say this about Barrett. Barrett finished his career with the most games played, 64 in Michigan program history. He's on the smaller side and can get engulfed at times. Oh, my God. But he has a good snap in his hips and hands when he plays downhill. His low center of gravity makes it tougher for blockers to get him under. Barrett chases with excellent effort, flashes good stopping power, and forced 3 fumbles last season. He can carry tight ends down the seam and get to the flat, matching up with backs and covers. So this guy is just apparently just he's got the heart. He has to have that dog in him. Is if he's too small to play linebacker and not athletic enough to play safety. Okay, he's got to have what the Panthers are looking for. It's a 7th round pick. I don't really get too caught up on those at all. I usually ignore them. If they make the roster, then oh, cool. Glad to see you here. But until then, Michael Barrett, I'm not going to really be thinking about you a lot. Welcome to Carolina. Wish you the best of luck. He was a 2-time second-team All-Big Ten defensive player, though, for folks out there at home. He's old as hell. He's 24 years old, and it adds more depth to linebacker. But what it appears to really do is add another special teamer at linebacker. They already have those. Claudin Cherlis, who they brought in last year after roster cutdown day from the Jets. He's that. Luigi Vallon, he's that. Now they have Michael Barrett to do that as well. So welcome to Carolina, Michael Barrett. So Michael Barrett, they take with the 240th overall pick in the draft. So they get 2 linebackers in this draft. They add to the defensive line with Jaden Crumedy in the 6th round. They add to the corner room in the 5th round with Chau Smith-Wade from Washington State. More of a nickel. Still leaves the door open, in my opinion, to signing Stephon Gilmore. And they have, at long last, brought in a true pass-catching tight end. I'm sorry, Tremble Hive. I still think your boy should stick around here in Carolina. Think he's a valuable asset. but he's not who you think he is. Ja'Tavion Sanders can at least be a pass catcher. Can he develop into a true blocker? They need to get that out of him. That's what Pat McPherson's job is here in Carolina. So that wraps up the 2024 NFL Draft. Panthers, they certainly have more pressing needs at certain positions, but they're thinking down the road, not just about 2024, and that is new. In the past, it was all about being all in for the upcoming season. This year, while I don't love that they skipped out on center, and I'll get into more of that on Monday. I'll give you my overall thoughts on the entire draft class, go back over those on Monday afternoon, really just focusing on what happened today. I would love to see that happen, but their focus more so, it seems like, down the line, understanding this is a rebuild in that it's not just that simple to turn around a 5-win team or 7-win team or 2-win team in one offseason. They're doing things, in my opinion, the right way. Don't love every single pick that they made, certainly at the points that they made them, but I do see a plan. I see a vision, and they demonstrated a plan last year. I don't know how much of the vision that they had shown, but this year we can see it. It's not just about being laser focused on this fall. It's also about what this team can be long-term. They got weapons for Bryce. They add to the defense, and they still have areas they can still address later on as we head towards OTAs and then the doldrums of the summer before training camp starts up here in uptown Charlotte. So I hope everybody enjoyed the draft. Hopefully the NFL gave you hope once again. There's plenty of time to figure out what this team will look like, and we'll talk about it throughout the next weeks and months here on Locked On Panthers. That's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter, at Julian Council, where I will be back with you on Friday, this upcoming Friday, answer your weekly Friday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me. Go ahead, get the questions in. Draft's over, so you can ask whatever you want now. So at me, DM me, get those questions in at Julian Council. Of course, follow there as well. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding, and I'll give you my full thoughts on the draft, even though I've kind of given them to you the last 3 days, but I'll condense it into one show on Monday. So talk to you then.